10 quarters of the province. And then,
Spirit. Look at that.
wait, and then that's why it's kind of funny. Oh, wow.
It's actually hilarious. It's actually funny
They get an
that it's but it's known, right? There's an A for effort there. There's a lot of trying. All right, let's let in our online crew. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Look at they knew enough to know about that. They just have anyone to know about the cost.
They know enough. And I find that fascinating. Although I have a video on Kabbalah, I'm not taking credit for that. That has almost 1 million views
And what about?
on YouTube. So clearly there's interest. That is for sure. Clearly, yeah. It's a very cool video. All right, let's welcome our online crew. Hey, Sandrine, great to see you. And David and Joy and Yaakov and Fran and Ellen and Alex. And of course,
Sounds like
our awesome in-person crew who is here despite the time change. We are all here together. We are gathered here together to celebrate the study of Kabbalah. Wasn't
And what is the
that
Kabbalah's view on time?
Kabbalah's view on time change? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I can make up something.
I think you should, because none of us would know any better.
Yeah, Kabbalah is anti-time change.
I thought so.
Let it be.
Rabbi,
Stop fooling around with the clocks.
if we come and join you, what's the status of breakfast? Because you mentioned that sometimes you do shalshuka, sometimes y'all do the bagels.
It's legit today. Today we have all right, Chef, you want to give us a description of what's here for breakfast?
We've got eggs 2 ways, scrambled and spicy.
2 types of eggs,
We've got hash browns.
hash browns,
We've got delicious warm bagels,
warm bagels,
cream cheese,
lox,
onion.
onion,
Sauteed onions to go with the
sauteed
eggs.
onions as well,
And we've also got tomato,
tomato,
cucumber,
cucumber,
yogurt.
yogurt
and
with
toppings,
fruit and toppings,
and granola toppings.
granola, cookies from where?
Allie's cookies.
Who? Wow, Allie's cookies. Yeah, where's Allie's cookies from?
I think the address is 5411, 4511 Old Pyramid Way.
There you go, in Dunwoody.
Excellent breakfast.
Yeah, it's an excellent breakfast. So it's still not too late. If anybody wants to join us in person, you can always join us. But it's great to be here together with you. All right, let's get started. All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Kabbalah Café. Welcome, welcome. So today's topic is American Idol, or as I like to call it, the birth of the American Idol or American Idols. And today we're going to talk about idolatry. Now, idolatry is a weird topic. When I say weird, it's like idolatry. Who thinks of idolatry? But as we'll see today, we're all thinking of idolatry all the time. So first, an anecdote. I forget the year. What was the year? We were in California doing, okay, so I'll tell you, I'll give you the setting. No, it was later. I was in California with a bunch of my friends, and we were doing something called the Traveling Hanukkah Theater, but with an R-E at the end, because it sounds cooler when you write the R-E at the end.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing the Traveling Hanukkah Theater, and the so it was around Hanukkah time. It was December time. It was LA and the surrounding areas. It was beautiful over there and fantastic. And we were, so the whole, there was a script and we had backdrops and everything was portable. It was ingeniously created, conceived of, orchestrated, but also engineered. We had our backdrops. Listen to this. Our backdrop was, we had cement. We had buckets, 5-gallon buckets that we filled with cement. We put in like a pipe, like an open pipe, in which we put in painter poles, extendable painter poles. All right. And then we had a few of those. And then on the painter poles, we attached blinds, like not the vertical, but the normal, like the whatever, like the 1 inch, whatever the blinds. Yeah. We painted those blinds to both sides, different scenes, 2 different scenes. Hanukkah. So one was the Beis Hamikdash and one was the Judean hills where the Maccabees were hiding out. For scene changes, we would go and just turn the blinds, boom, next scene change. Everything fit into a car, into a vehicle or whatever, van, portable. Take off the blinds, roll them up, right? They collapse. The painter poles, collapse them, The buckets, we had a schlep. Okay, that was heavy, but everything else ready to go. I mention this only because we were looking for a prop for the idol that they wanted the Jews to bow down. In the story, they wanted the Jews, the Greeks wanted the Jews to bow down to idols. And so there we were in, what was it, Walmart or Target or something, whatever existed back then, maybe Kmart, who knows. And we were looking for some sort of thing that the kids could find funny for an idol. So right then, it was right at the time that Monsters, Inc. came out. You know that movie, Monsters, Inc.? And there was, there was like these different monsters. One of them was a big eye.
We scare because we care.
We scare because we care, exactly. So I forget the name. There was Sully. I think Sully was one of them. Mike, was it Mike? Was Mike the little? Yeah, he was the eye. So they had a stuffed representation of him, and we're like, oh, this is perfect. An eye doll.
Look at him smiling.
An eye.
He's too old to know what the hell they're talking about.
But it was an idol, an idol. Anyway, the point is like this. Idolatry sounds like a topic that's idolatry. Who's bowing down to idols? There are subtle forms of idol worship that exist today, prevalent in our lives, and this is what we're going to talk about today. The first thing we're going to deal with is, what are the origins of idolatry and idol worship? And to understand this, I want to share the following, and that is, every lie begins with a truth. If there was no truth at the base of a lie, the lie could not exist.
Big lie.
In other words, right? If every lie, we're making a statement. I'll give you an example soon about idolatry. But every lie needs a foundation of truth to give it substance. Truth is substantive. Falsehood is not. If you want to pull off a big lie, you have to have some sort of foundation of truth, i.e. substance, around which to package your dishonesty and lie. That's how it works. That's how it works in life. Every lie needs a kernel of truth. By the way, in Hebrew, for those of us that are a little bit familiar with the Hebrew letters, there's something very fascinating. When you look at the Hebrew word for truth versus the Hebrew word for falsehood or a lie, you find something compelling. I wish I would have put this on a sheet. I have a sheet, but I didn't put this on the sheet. The Hebrew word for truth is emet, or as Ashkenazim pronounce it sometimes, emes, right? Emet. How do you spell that Hebrew word? Aleph, mem, and taf. Now, if you can picture those letters in your mind, so you'll recognize that those three letters are all wide letters that have a base. The Aleph is a wide letter, and it's the full width of a letter, and it has 2 points at the bottom to stand on. The mem also has points to stand at the bottom, and the taf as well. It has 2 points, and it even has a little extendo line to give it even more balance and substance, because truth can stand up. Sheker depends which font you use, but if you use the right font, the shin kofresh, the shin comes to a point at the bottom. The one in the Torah, right? The one in the biblical shin, the Torah scroll shin, comes to a point at the bottom, standing on 1 point. The kuf also has 1 point at the bottom. The reish, 1 point at the bottom. What's the message? Truth can stand. Falsehood collapses. So if you want to create a lie that stands, you know what you need to do? Mix in a little bit of truth. You with me on this? To mix in a little emes, a little emet into your sheker is what makes the sheker, what makes the falsehood stand up.
I'll give you an example. I worked for Genius, largest carpet retailer in the town. He used to run ads. The ads were unbelievable. He'd write these ads. One ad he had, back 1, back 2, back 3. Big double script. So we're at a meeting. I said, Marvin, I'm not sure all those are true. He said, look, if you're going to lie, you always lie with facts.
It's a good line. Sam said he was working for a company. He was working with a company, and they had an ad. They put part of their ad campaign. They had fact 1, fact 2, fact 3. So he said, I don't think those are facts. He said, listen, What was the line? What was the
If you're
punchline?
gonna lie, you lie with facts.
If you're gonna lie, you gotta lie with facts. That's the point, right? You have to have some sort of truth that underlies the lie to make the lie believable. That's the way it is.
From that.
There you go. And that's the way it is. So here's the deal. So when you have a lie that's predicated on absolute nothingness, it's easy to see through it. When you have a lie that has an admixture of truth and you look at it and you're analyzing, you're like, well, kind of seems true. There are elements of truth. Maybe the whole thing is true. And so we find this as well when it comes to the idea of the origins of idolatry and idol worship. So let me explain. Originally, idol worship emanates from a place of belief in God. And I know that sounds crazy, but initially, serving idols, worshiping foreign deities begins with belief in God and wanting a connection. But I want to talk about the specific type of belief. It's a belief in a God that is so high and so pure and so transcendent that there's no way that God could ever get involved in this reality, in this ugly, fragmented, broken, dishonest, etc. reality. In other words, it's the perception of God. It's putting God on a pedestal that opens the door for other forces to run this reality. Does that make sense? If you can see, which philosophers and theologians, and even in Judaism, we find this understanding. If we posit that God is pure, perfect, and unchanging, which means that God is not a being like you and I being a being that as we learn and as we live, we change, we're constantly changing, we're learning, we're growing, both physically, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, right? We're constantly changing. If we posit that God is unchanging, despite the fact that God creates this reality, there's really one logical conclusion that we can make, which is that God may have initiated the creation of this reality, but is certainly not hands-on. Because if God were hands-on, he would be changed by this creation. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Everyone is changed by what they're invested in, right? That when you're invested in something, then how that works out affects you, right? The very definition of being invested in something means that the way it goes, you go. So if you're a sports fan and you're invested in, I don't know, the Atlanta Hawks, how are they doing this year? Good?
It's the NBA. I don't pay attention.
All right. So if you're invested, clearly no one here is invested in the Hawks. But if
Braves, though, that'd be different.
Atlanta Braves, good. So if you're invested in your team, whatever team that is, and your team wins, you get excited. Your team loses, you get a little saddened by the loss, right? You're invested by it. You're invested in it, and thus you're affected by it. The problem is, if we say the same thing about God, then not only does it seem to be that we're humanizing God, but the theological and the philosophical stickiness of that conclusion is that you're basically saying, again, if God creates this world and is invested in it, then what you're really saying is that God is affected by what we do, for good or for bad. And that means that God's mood is changing. Now we're dealing with a God who's changing. Great. What happened to our pure God? So in an attempt to keep God pure and untouchable and unmovable, right? God is the mover who cannot be moved. In order to protect that, the philosophers, the great thinkers, starting from the very beginning of humankind, put God on such a high pedestal, basically saying that God is the CEO of the CEO of the CEO. In other words, the highest, but totally hands off on this. Not involved in the day-to-day operations, not affected by profits or losses. God is completely beyond being affected by this reality. I want to hand this out. Rabbi Tzvi Freeman has a beautiful framing of this concept. in his book, Bringing Heaven Down to Earth, 365 Meditations of the Rabbi. I'm going to pull this up online as well.
So this is
Um,
basic plagiarism.
This, it's not plagiarism if we're actually using it as a source.
Credit.
Yeah, we're literally using him as a source, and it's brilliant the way he frames it. Okay, so let's understand. Let me pull this up on Zoom. Here we go. Kabbalah Café. Have a little faith. Here we go. Exiling God. Exiling God. Okay, you guys have that? Have a little faith. Chapter 2. That's what we're starting today. And here, I'm going to read the words of Rabbi Tzvi Freeman, very poetic. They have banished God into exile. They have decreed that he is too holy, too transcendent to belong in our world. They have determined he does not belong within the ordinary and the daily run of things. And so they have driven him out of his garden to the realm of prayer and meditation, to the sanctuaries and the secluded places of hermits. They have sentenced the Creator to exile, and his creation they have locked in a dark, cold prison. And he pleads, let me come back to my garden, to the place in which I have found delight when it all began. Essentially, what human beings did, human beings trying to, as the next text has it, the human beings trying to be nice to God, basically said that a perfect God, a pure God, a God of echad, of oneness, cannot be involved, cannot be mired in the murkiness of this fragmented world. It's not possible. And so what they did was they essentially lobotomized reality. They said God is up there and the world is down here.
Who is they?
The philosophers and the ancients. We'll see soon from Rambam, from Maimonides, that it happened in the very first generations of humankind, when idolatry first began. We'll see that straight up from Rambam. Way before. This is like in the shortly after Adam and Eve. This thinking already started. By the way, there's a verse in Tehillim. It's in Hallel. We sing it every Rosh Chodesh. Hashamayim, shamayim la Hashem, v'haaretz nasan livnei adam. What does that mean? The heaven is for God. The earth is for us. What does that mean? All right, we'll leave that for another class. But what does that mean? That's the conception that God is in the heavens. And by the way, the heavens doesn't mean like outer space. It means the spiritual heavens. And us, this is our realm. This is our playground. And that comes not from a place, it originates not from a place of spiritual viciousness or denial of the Creator. I don't believe in God. God is not real. I don't want God. No, it's saying, it's coming from, initiates, and it begins, it originates in a place of, I do believe in God. But God is so perfect, so holy, so pure, that God is up there. God is not down here. Putting God on a pedestal. Now, let's look at the next quote. Truly infinite. Now, why is this wrong? According to the way we understand this, Judaism, as illuminated in the teachings of Kabbalah and Hasidic philosophy. Why is that wrong? Before we read the next text, and I'm going to just close the sharing for a moment so I can see you guys a little bit more closely over here. The reason for this is because think about the calculation here. We're saying that God is so big, is so perfect, is so pure, that there's no way he can be involved in the day-to-day running of this operation, which is so ugly. It's gross for God, for a perfect God, for an infinite God to be involved in a finite universe makes no sense. That's the mathematical calculation. How can you fit an infinite being into a finite space? It doesn't make sense. Must be the infinite is in the realm of infinity, and the finite's in the finite. Hashamayim, shamayim l'Hashem. Heaven is for God, and earth is for man.
Throw a klipa on it, then that's fine.
Oh, hold on. But here's why that calculation doesn't make sense. Because true infinity, and I'm not talking about the mathematical infinity, but a being who is truly unbounded by any possible limitation is also not bound by the limitation of being unlimited. Are you with me?
Mhm.
In other words, if you say that God is so big that he can't fit into this space, or so pure that he can't fit into this space, you know what you're doing? You're limiting God. You're saying God can't be in this space. Oh, so in the process of trying to give God, to be true to God's infinity and largeness, as it were, you're actually making God a small God. What you're saying is God can't squeeze himself into this space. God can't remain pure even while running this space. Oh, they believe, no, but they believe that he couldn't. They believe that he could. The philosophers believed, and they thought a lot about this. By the way, this is a philosophical approach that God can't. There's no way. He's too pure to be involved in this. I understand why that sounds like almost a choice, but in doing so, they're saying there's a formula, there's logic, and that doesn't make sense. Infinite, infinite, it doesn't make sense. Pure and impure doesn't make sense. So obviously, God is not here. But meanwhile, the true definition of infinity, the true definition in the Hebrew, Ein Sof, the true meaning of Ein Sof, which means without limits, literally means without end, but without limits means that you're not even limited to the limitation of infinity, which again is a crazy way to think. I'll give you an example of teachers. So imagine you're thinking about a first grade teacher. And this first grade teacher is a very good teacher teaching first graders. Now, what do first graders learn? They learn ABCs.
1 + 1.
Yeah, they're learning the basics. This teacher is an excellent teacher.
I think you're going into the mimer we're learning in the morning now.
No, we're
About how the teacher has to dumb it down for the student.
yeah. So let's see how this plays out. So you have the first grade teacher who's teaching first graders on their level. Then you have an Einstein, a brilliant scientist who's teaching high level, like super high level physics.
Trigonometry.
Yeah, or whatever. Like let's say physics, like high level, whatever. Quantum physics. And you ask the question, okay, so who's a greater teacher? Right? And you might say, well, somebody might say, how do you define greater? Okay. But one could argue reasonably that clearly the advanced science teacher is a greater teacher than the first grade teacher. One could argue. I'm not going to make that argument, as you'll see in a moment, because here's why. Because the first grade teacher couldn't teach that class. Okay. But if that advanced science teacher can't teach first graders, they're also limited. They're stuck in the largeness of the idea, in the depth of the idea. Here's the simple question. Can Einstein explain, right? E equals mc squared. Can he explain that to a 5-year-old? And
He might have been. He was an unusual guy.
So that's what I'm saying.
Energy equals mass plus. No, he
Times
can't.
acceleration. Here's the thing. If Einstein, here's how this would work. This is not a dig against Einstein, whatever. The point is like this. If Einstein couldn't teach that to a 5-year-old, you know what it means? Despite his brilliance and the grandness of his knowledge, of his information, he's also limited in his way of understanding. Sorry? I'm saying, but is there a way to make it relevant and make it relative to a 5-year-old? You can take, a good teacher can take even the most subtle concepts, maybe not the formula on a blackboard, but take the most subtle concepts and give some kernels of wisdom to even a 5-year-old.
I think Sam could do it using charts and graphs. He's proven himself.
By the way, you would have to obviously modify it severely, like in a huge way.
Dumb it down.
Using pictures, using a story, living it out, experiential learning, whatever it is. I don't know how to explain it because I don't know the core of it. But someone who really understands it really understands it. And again, I don't know if Einstein could or couldn't, it's not about him. But someone who really understands a brilliant concept can bring it down to someone who's never encountered that concept before. That's the mark of the truly brilliant teacher. So you have the first grade teacher, then you have the advanced teacher. But the truly brilliant teacher is the one who can exist in both spaces, is the one who can exist in the advanced class as well as in front of the kindergartners, in front of the first graders, the one who can exist in both spaces and be equally proficient in both. That's someone who really has the wisdom. And we're saying, this is just an example, but similarly, when it comes to God, if we would say that God is only applicable, or God only exists in the realm of infinity, that's his playground, whereas in a finite space, he's not relevant, he doesn't exist, he doesn't get involved, he doesn't roll up his sleeves and get dirty in that space. If we say that, then we are limiting God. The true definition of infinity, or Ein Sof, without limits, is that you're not even limited to the unlimited. Because being unlimited is also a limitation if you say that you can't also be limited. Now, let's read this inside Truly Infinite. This is again from Bringing Heaven Down to Earth, Rabbi Freeman. Take a look at how he phrases this right over here. Truly Infinite. The philosophers are only trying to be nice to God. They can't allow an infinite being to get his complete, simple unity messed up with a lowly, material, fragmented world. And so they banish him to the far ethereal heavens, as removed as possible from our world. By their way of thinking, you can forget about miracles, prophecy, or divine intervention in your life. God is just too far out there. Those philosophers are fools. In their groping for the infinite, they have ended up with a God bound by the limitations of the human mind. In fact, second sheet, the ultimate measure of the infinite is that it can be found within the finite as well. God is here now within everything, and God is one. That is the true measure of infinity, or unlimitedness, and that is that it's not even limited to being unlimited. Again, one could argue, why is finite an advantage for God? For saying that God is pure and perfect and infinite, why is not being here a disadvantage? I understand that, and that's how the philosophers believe. That it's like somebody who's wealthy, and you're saying they have everything. No, they're missing something. They're missing poverty. You'd never say that, right? That's silly. They have everything in the world. Nope, they don't have poverty. That's not. I'm saying it would be hard to make that argument, right? In human terms, that someone who has everything they want is missing not having everything, and thus is actually paradoxically lacking. It would be a bit meshuggah to make that argument. But with God, that's what we're saying. If God really has everything, has every capability, then God is also found in a limited space. In the language of, who writes this? One of the great Kabbalists writes this. It is I'm forgetting the source.
Rabbi of Voloshin.
No. This is anyway. One of the great Kabbalists writes this idea. He says, "Kishem shekocho bebilti bal gvul," just like God's ability exists to be infinite. Kach yechote begvul, so too he has the ability and limitation. Because if you don't say that, then you're limiting him. Just like God is unlimited, God also, I say God is limited. God can exist in the limited space as well, if he so chooses. And if you say he can't, because God is too big to fit there, then now you're limiting God. Okay, so that's the idea. Now, how does this play out historically? So that's why we have Rambam here. Now, Maimonides, he doesn't give this whole philosophical or mystical explanation of this. He just breaks down historically what happened and how idols were born. Now, where is this coming from? This is coming from literally his Mishnah Torah. Mishnah Torah is his 14-volume work of Jewish law, comprehensive. There's never been a work of Jewish law. Well, I mean, the Talmud has Jewish law, but a dedicated work of exclusive work of Jewish law that includes Kol HaTorah, Kula, all of Torah. The Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, only has laws that pertain to post-temple, post-Beit HaMikdash Judaism. Maimonides has 14 volumes known as the Yad HaChazaka, the strong arm, but Yad means hand. Yad is Yudalad 14 volumes of Jewish law. In his laws of idol worship, in the opening chapter of his laws of idol worship, he talks about where does idolatry begin? All right, so let's do this inside. I'm going to read this. This is the birth of idols. Let me share this, share my screen, and let's jump in. Birth of idols. Now, we're going to begin here with a verse from Genesis 4, 2 verses, verse 25 and 26. So this is the opening chapters of Genesis, of Bereshit, are filled with drama. Right, we have Adam and Eve, and shortly thereafter, they're on this earth for a few hours, and the next thing you know, they're eating. Right, they're eating from the forbidden fruit, and then one of their sons, they have 2 sons. One kills the other. It's like the drama in the first 2 or 3 chapters of Bereshit. This incredible drama, and so here the Torah tells us what happens next. Here we go. Adam knew his wife again. Of course, biblical knowing means, intimacy, physical intimacy. Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, and she named him Seth, or Shas, saying, for God has given Shas, me, other seed instead of Abel. Cain killed Abel. And so Adam and Eve have another child, and his name is Shas, Seth, for Cain slew him. And to Seth, also to him a son was born. So this is now a grandchild of Adam and Eve. And he named him Enosh. Understand this. We have Adam and Eve, that's generation 1. Then we have Cain and Abel, but Abel's gone. So now you have Shas, but that's all generation 2, the children of Adam and Eve. Then the grandkids. So the 3rd generation is Enosh. And then the Torah says something cryptic. Then it became common to call by the name of the Lord. It became common to call by the name of the Lord. It sounds like, everyone was calling God. Sounds great. Everyone was davening, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. They were proclaiming the name of God. Not exactly. The way all the commentators understand this, that is when it became common to profane the name of God. Calling the name of the Lord means that everybody was calling everything God. This is a God, and that's a God, and that's a God, and that's a God. In other words, it was actually, it's a signal for idolatry, idol worship. And Rambam Maimonides explains what happened. What happened? You have the first people, Adam and Eve, they know where they came from. They certainly told it to their children. God made us, God made all of this. What happens to the grandchildren? Literally, the 3rd generation is off the rails. What happened? He explains. During the times of Enosh, mankind made a great mistake. And the wise men of that generation gave thoughtless counsel. And Enosh himself, Adam's grandson, was one of those who erred. What was the mistake? Right? What was the mistake? This sounds like such a dramatic opening to this text. So he says their mistake was as follows. They said God created stars and spheres, planets, with which to control the world. He placed them on high and treated them with honor, making them servants who minister before him. Let me just stop here for a second. What was the mistake? They said like this: God is a CEO, and what does he do? He puts in middle management, puts managers to because he's not managing this world. Why would he ever? We already laid the foundation for this text, right? God is not managing this world. Why would God be involved in the day-to-day operations?
Because it wasn't that hard back then. He only had a handful of people to deal with.
That is true.
Come on,
That is,
about it.
but he was thinking already about scaling this operation. He wasn't thinking short. He was thinking long term. There's gonna be 8 billion people. There's no way. So what is it? So their mistake was they look up and they see, right? And they see, and they still could. There was 4 people on earth, and they still couldn't get along. Anyway, so
still deaf.
it's unbelievable. So you look up and you see the sun. Pretty powerful. Life can't exist without light, without sun, without heat. Things can't grow without the sun. The sun is huge. And so the people thought of that time, they made a simple calculation. God created the sun, obviously, but created the sun to be a macher, to be something that contributes. The sun is a thing. So look at the language again. God, they said, they believed God created stars and spheres with which to control the world. He placed them on high and treated them with honor, making them servants who minister before him. So God created all of these servants, these ministers, the sun, the moon, the stars, the constellations, the planets, the astrological signs, etc. All of them were created by God. They're all serving God, but they have their own role. Accordingly, let's continue. It is fitting to praise and glorify them and to treat them with honor. Understand this. Let's continue. They perceived this to be the will of God, blessed be he. They thought God wanted them to accord honor and praise and glory to the stars and constellations. Why? That they perceive this to be the will of God, blessed be he, that they magnify and honor those whom he magnified and honored, just as a king desires that the servants who stand before him be honored. Indeed, doing so is an expression of honor to the king. The king has servants. When you see a servant of the king, you're supposed to act with deference. I mean, apparently, I don't know, I've never been around the king, but if I were, that seems like the protocol, at least what he's stating here. But Maimonides is stating, and he knew something, a thing or two about rulers and leaders and kings. So when you have a king who puts someone in a position of power, even though that position of power is only due to the king putting them in that position, you still have to honor, glorify, praise, and give deference to that minister or that role, that person in that role. They believe the same thing is true with the star, sun, moon, and stars. Let's continue. After conceiving of this notion, they began to construct temples to the stars and offer sacrifices to them. They would praise and glorify them with words and prostrate themselves before them, because by doing so, they would, according to their false conception, be fulfilling the will of God. They thought that God wanted them to worship and to honor and to glorify the middle management that God put in place.
So they weren't doing anything wrong
In their understanding.
in their understanding.
They were doing everything wrong, but in their understanding, the way they understood the hierarchy, the structure, the way God structures his corporation, or his creation corporation, is that God is at the top. But as we said, the spiritual or the emotional or the philosophical underpinnings of that is that God is too big to handle the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty. So he puts other forces in control of that. And then it only makes sense to honor, to glorify, to praise those that God puts in those positions. So they built temples. They literally constructed temples, he says, and offered sacrifice to them, believing that this was God's will. They weren't, God forbid, turning away from God. They were fulfilling what God wanted. Let's continue.
I mean, in that point, God spoke to Adam and Eve, God spoke later on to Cain. There is no mention after that of God speaking to anybody or actually giving them any guidance as far as how to worship him or anything. So they were basically left on their own.
Right. Correct.
That was the last thing
Until
that
Sinai,
God.
Yaakov in the hallway. That's where everything is.
Even until Sinai, because before Sinai, Moses was God.
Well, I was
Was given something from God to go and tell the people.
Yeah, but that was very limited. That was very limited intel. Very limited intel. The patriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they had some, and there was a yeshiva, there was information, insider scoop, that Shem, right, the son of Noach, had. There was a tradition of worship, but it wasn't by any measure, it wasn't widespread. It wasn't out there. As to why, I mean, that's a general question. Why does God wait around 2,000 years, right, or so, more, 2448, 2,500 years to share his intention for humankind?
This 2,500 years is no big deal to him.
Yeah, but I mean, the first 2,500 years, the world is groping in darkness, essentially. So those individuals kind of discovered God on their own, sort of, and or knew where to look to find. But you have this idea of God reaching out and saying, this is what I want from you. This is what I'd like from you. Here's the document. Here's the manual. That doesn't happen until the year 2448. And that's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer for that, but it seems like the language of our sages, for the first 2,000 years or so, the world was stumbling ba'afela in darkness. And after that, the light, the world's illuminated.
It's unfair though to those people that they're being wiped out later on.
But according to
They
the,
didn't have any God.
I'm with you.
Not you, not the prophet, not nobody.
I'm with you. How do you punish if you don't have light? I don't have a good answer for that. But I will tell you that the sages say, I think it's in the Talmud or the Medrash, that a parallels creation. Vayhi erev, vayhi boker. First you have night, and then you have day. First you have darkness, and then you have light. Why is it created like that? Why isn't it created that first you have the light, and then you can battle the darkness that comes afterwards, right? Why is it that there's first darkness? Now you can't see, and then you have the light afterwards. Why do I need to spend 12 hours groping in darkness, and then you're going to give me the light? I don't know.
We also started with Tohu Vavohu. We had
Chaos and void. Yeah.
In our modern Orthodox Jewish high school that I learned, they taught us that the desire for idol worship was so strong that they just couldn't fight it, that they
Yes.
begged Hashem
Yep.
to take it away. And he said, okay, I'll take it away, but you lose Nevuah as a result.
Yeah.
So they taught us right.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay.
That is absolutely correct. There was that prophecy. That was at the time, at the beginning of the Second Temple era. They
just
prayed,
couldn't do it.
they fasted, the Talmud says, they prayed and fasted that the urge for idolatry be removed. And it was, but it also came at the, because everything's balanced. So now if you have no desire for idol worship, but you have prophecy, which is the word of God, being transmitted. So now it's way too easy to do a mitzvah, and it's way too hard to sin, because now there's an imbalance there. So if you take away the desire to serve idols, you're also going to take away the light of prophecy at the same time. The sages also prayed that God take away the urge for
Bacon.
for sexual immorality, and it says that God also took that away.
But that's interesting.
And then
because
the Talmud says the Talmud says that as a result of that, there were no eggs in the land of Israel, and it just means that urge. I mean, the urge for impropriety, that in a negative sense, it's hard to differentiate that from the general urge. But if God were to take that away, then life would be unsustainable. So that God was basically sending a message: we can't touch that, but idolatry we could, but that's going to come at the expense of prophecy.
And yet we still have idolatry today.
We still do have idolatry, but in a different form. Even though one could say we're still running after it in the same way. There's a famous story in the Talmud. It's a different form. Our phones, right? There's a different form of idolatry, but there's a story in the Talmud. There's a story in the Talmud where this rabbi is giving a lecture to his students. And he says to his students, tomorrow, he finishes his lessons, tomorrow we're going to talk about Menashe. Menashe and his chaverim and his ilk. Who was Menashe? He was one of the Jewish kings. So that night, Menashe, King Menashe, appears to this rabbi in a dream. And he says to him, how dare you call me Menashe and not King Menashe? How dare you call me just by my first name as if we're buddies? He said, if you would have lived then when we were living, you would have, this is what he says in the dream. He said, you would have lifted up the hem of your cloak and run after me to serve idols. Menashe was one of the worst of the worst. He was a Jewish king who erected altars for idols.
He was the one
in
that
Israel.
did it.
One of the many Jewish kings who were into that. But here's the point. He was telling this rabbi 1,000 years later that had you been there, you would have done the same thing. Because this rabbi, to your point, this rabbi was living after the era where that desire had been already
Wiped
decimated on that physical level. We still again have other addictions, etc. But to literally worship an idol, that desire, that temptation, we can't relate to it because it was literally removed. But imagine living in an era when that was not removed. He says, you can't judge. So you learn a very important lesson from that story, right? Can't judge someone until you're in their shoes. And when we make a mistake, we make that mistake all the time. We think, oh, we can apply our experience to someone else's experience. Try.
Today with all the historical going back and saying this guy was bad, this guy was bad, that's a way back.
That's the way we understand it, right? Even going back 20, 30 years. Again, I'm not, this is by no means we're going to get into details, but like, it's very hard, and it becomes an exercise in, I don't know, we have to ask ourselves if that's an honest approach to apply conditions from one era to another era. I mean, I don't want to open up a can of worms, but oh, here I am. The Rebbe even spoke about carbon dating, right? They have carbon dating the universe. Well, he was basically saying he was not saying anything definitive. He was just putting out a little thing to think about. He writes in one of his letters to scientists. He writes in one of his letters. He's like, the premise of carbon dating is that if you measure how fast and how the time of change, or how things change right now, and you extrapolate that backwards, then you get to a number. That presumes that all of the conditions that exist today existed always.
Including time.
And there's an assumption there that it's impossible to prove, because we don't know what those conditions, atmospheric, I don't know. I don't know the science.
Argue that the flood.
Yeah. And again, this is not, by the way, again, I know, and this is opening up a can of worms, and I'm not suggesting that the science is, I'm not taking a stance on this. What I'm simply saying is that applying what you know today, or what exists today, or what exists in one realm or one person to another experience in another time, another person, etc., is itself it's not necessarily a foolproof science on that. But let's, yeah.
But you've been,
Yeah, for sure.
Talking about Enosh
Yes.
himself was one of those who erred.
Yeah.
His name in Hebrew is like mortally wounded or something. Is that any significance? I mean, it's a weird name.
And Enosh is one of the names of man, I think. I don't know about mortally wounded. Could be.
It means that too.
Interesting. Maybe he's like fatally flawed because he's moving to this place. That's an interesting insight. Very interesting. Yeah.
So I was listening to you on the way here, after I slept an hour. So they have a tradition then that, God created all of these
Forces.
stars and forces, but they didn't have a tradition from their mother and father.
Grandfather.
And their grandparents that, but God created these things, and God also is the greatest power, and these
Yes.
are under.
So here's the thing. That subtlety, so there's a gray area there. They believed, excellent question. So I'll just repeat the question. So did Adam and Eve, did their parents or whatever it is, not tell them about the fact that God was ultimately the one in charge? They did. They believed that God was ultimately in charge, but God did create these underlings. These underlings are the ones that are on the ground facilitating life, sun, moon, and stars, and forces and tides. They felt like that was those forces were the ones that on the ground were helping out, and thus it only makes sense because out of deference to God to honor who God put in place. So, for example, just a simple example is also brought in Jewish texts. The analogy of, imagine you go to a restaurant and you order food, and the waiter brings out the food. That reminds me of my Boca experience. There used to be a joke. End of December flight. I don't know, maybe Tel Aviv to New York or the opposite. But this is before 9/11. It was like the captain makes the announcement to all of those sitting in their seats, Merry Xmas, to all those standing in the aisles, Happy Hanukkah, that sort of thing. Yeah, the Jews are always like, there's always little restlessness going on over there.
that's funny.
Yeah. But nowadays, everyone's got to be strapped in. You're not moving anywhere. It's like lockdown. But back to the point. So you had asked about the waiter. I was giving the example of the waiter. So you have the waiter. So you go to a restaurant, the waiter brings out the food, and you thank the waiter. Is that blasphemous? The waiter didn't make the food. The chef made the food. How dare you thank the waiter? You're thanking the waiter because the waiter brought you the food. So they felt, is it wrong to thank the sun and moon and stars? They didn't make the food. but they're delivering the food. What's wrong? The sun and moon and stars, they're involved. Should we say thank you? You get a package from UPS. Delivery guy comes with a box, or FedEx, whatever your favorite, package delivery service is. You're waiting for this. And you meet them at the door because you're so excited to open this box. And you say to the person, thank you. How dare you? They didn't send it to you. It's not theirs. They didn't make it. Because you're being a mensch. They thought they were being a mensch. Were they not told by the tradition? They knew their tradition. They knew God created heaven and earth. But they felt that if God put the sun and moon and stars in place to facilitate, you thank them also. You
But
think
God wasn't communicating with them.
I don't.
After Cain, there was no, and Cain was the bad guy.
Cain was the bad guy. I don't have. Listen, I get it. This is not to attack anybody. This is the evolution of idolatry. So let's continue.
Maybe since these things are just created, that presence of God, like a baby, you can kind of see in the baby's eyes a little alien thing. That blue, that dark blue, like they all.
Yeah.
So that
Maybe I'm still listening.
I'm not with that part.
New York Times.
innate intelligence in things they misunderstood as that has independent decision-making power, which
Right.
does not.
Exactly.
It's just
Oh, wait, 1 second. 1 second. Good. Hold that thought, because it evolves from thanking the waiter to attributing power and decision-making ability to the waiter. Right. There's a subtlety there. I think you're talking about step 2. Step 1 is simply thank the waiter. Step 2 is if I thank the waiter, I can get a larger portion of food, or I can get my service faster. You understand? Step 1 is still God's in control, but these forces are put into place. I'm going to thank them. Step 2 is now I can get more out of them by worshiping. Step 1 is still not about the selfish agenda. Again, look at the language of Rambam. Rambam is brilliantly precise. Look in paragraph 1, 2, 3. Look at the end of we read this. Look at the end of that third paragraph. They would praise and glorify them with words and prostrate themselves before them, because by doing so, they would, according to their false conception, be fulfilling the will of God. It wasn't about selfish purposes. They thought literally fulfilling the will of God is to worship these, to thank these things. Now, let's continue. This was the essence of the worship of false gods, and this was the rationale of those who worship them. They would not say that there is no other God except for the star. They wouldn't say that. They wouldn't say that this star is the ultimate. They would never say that at that point in time. They would say this star is a star made by God, powered by God, but it's a star. Listen to this. After many years passed, again, without communication, without direction, okay? After many years passed, there arose people, false prophets, who told their nations that God had commanded them to say, serve the star or all the stars, sacrifice to it, offer libations to it, build a temple for it, and make an image of it, so that all people, including the women, the children, and the common people, could bow to it. In other words, there were those that came with an agenda, whatever that was, probably for power and money and other sorts of influence. And they said, we heard that these stars are not just to be thanked because God put them in place, but if you thank them, you're going to get even more, and it's beneficial, and you have to, etc. He would inform them of a form that he had conceived and tell them that this is the image of the particular star, claiming that this was revealed to him in a prophetic vision. He said, if you want to worship the sun, this is what the sun god looks like. And he would create an image. An image, I don't know if it was like an orb, because probably all be orbs at that point, but it was like an image. They said, this is the image of that particular star. And that he derived this via prophecy. In this manner, the people began to make images in temples, under trees, and on the tops of mountains and hills. So now, not only are they worshiping conceptually the sun, moon, and stars, but they're actually creating images, idols. They're creating forms, physical forms that are meant to mimic or meant to capture those sun, moon, and stars that they were worshiping. Let's continue. People would gather together and bow down to them, and the false prophets would say, this image, not the star.
False prophets or the real prophets?
No. The false prophets would say, this image, yeah, whatever it is the source of benefit or harm. You see how we've evolved here? It's no longer that God created a minister, we should thank the minister. This is now it's not only about the sun, it's about the image of the sun or whatever that image looks like. And now it's not that it's in the employ of God, it's that it has the ability, it has the volition, it has the choice to determine benefit or harm. So it is appropriate. This image is the source of benefit or harm. It is appropriate to serve it and fear it. The priest would tell them, this service, serving this idol in this way, will enable you to multiply and be successful. Do this and this, or do not do this or this. They would then create basically a worship around this image of this planet or star or constellation. And they would say, if you do this, this star will bless you. If you do this, it's going to curse you. Subsequently, other deceivers arose and declared that a specific star, sphere, or angel had spoken to them and commanded them, serve me in this manner. He would then relate a mode of service, telling them, do this, do not do this. It kept on evolving. It got legs, like everything in life. Things evolve. Thus, these practices spread around the world. People would serve images with strange practices, one more distorted than the other, offer sacrifices to them, and bow down to them. As the years passed, God's glorious and awesome name was forgotten by the entire population. That is just mind-boggling. Basically, what started off as a way to honor God, because you're honoring God by honoring those that God put in place, that they felt that's honoring God because God put the sun, moon, and stars. So certainly God, we should honor that because it's honoring God. That evolves ultimately after many, many years into who's God. There's 100. Yes, and the way things work, as we know, everyone's trying to outdo the other and up the ante, right? It's always like you got to go more and got to go more and got to go more, and eventually it gets to the point where who's talking about God? It's all about the planets. It's all about the sun, moon, and stars, and it's all about the physical forms that are created to symbolize those things. It was no longer God was no longer part of their speech or thought, and they no longer knew him. Thus, all the common people, the women and the children, would know only the image of wood or stone, and the temples of stone to which they were trained from their childhood to bow down and serve, and in whose name they swore. So people had no conception of God, only the conception of the temples and the idols. The wise men among them would think that there is no other God, that there is no God other than the stars and spheres, for whose sake and in resemblance of which they had made these images. The eternal rock, God, was not recognized or known by anyone in the world, with the exception, as we mentioned before, of a few individuals. For example, Chanoch, Metushelach, or what's the English word? Methuselah, Noach, Shem, and Aver. The world continued in this fashion until the pillar of the world, the patriarch Abraham, was born. And I feel bad even cutting it over here because we're just about to drop. And Abraham now reintroduces God's name into the world. That was that's what makes Abraham. Abraham, not only did he know and recognize the Creator, but he made it his life's mission to re-educate the populace about that reality. Because you had these great tzaddikim, Chanoch, Methuselah, Noah, Shem, and Aver. These were individuals who did know the truth, but they kept it to themselves. You know, Noach is famously called in Yiddish a tzaddik in pelts. That means a tzaddik in a fur coat. And the example that's brought in Hasidic philosophy is when it's cold outside or inside, there's two ways to get warm. One is you put on a fur coat, right, back in the day, or faux fur, as it were, whatever your particular, persuasion is. So you put on a coat. That's one way. Second way is to light a fire. The difference is if you put on a coat, only you're warm. You light a fire, everyone around you is warm. So these great tzaddikim, they knew the truth, but they put on a fur coat. In a world that was cold and dark, absent and devoid of God's knowledge, of God, they put on a coat. They said, we're good. The rest of the world is sheker. The rest of the world is false. And we have the truth. Now let's go to our secret cave and study. Abraham, it said, as a young boy, he continues. Maimonides continues. 3 years old. He looked around. He looked at the sun. He said, that can't be. Sun is in charge. It sets. The moon's in charge. It also goes away. Nothing of nature has the ultimate force. There must be, he concluded. And it's evolved in his mind over time. There must be a force greater than all of these that's making them go. And thus he arrived at this idea. And then he discovered Shem and Abraham. He discovered these other individuals that knew the truth. But then he did something they didn't do. He decided that he's going to tell people about it. And he's going to make a storm about it. So Nimrod, who was the king, all about idolatry. So instead of just not serving idols in the comfort of his own home and worshiping his God, Hashem, he says Nimrod is a liar. He breaks his father's idols. Nimrod's a liar. Nimrod throws him to a furnace. He goes big. Abraham is not content to just believe in God in his heart, in his mind, in his own home. But he's like, that's it. We're going to go big with this. And then God tells him, go even bigger, lech lecha, right? Go and spread this information. And he does. And that becomes the Jewish mission. The Jewish mission is not simply to believe in God, but it's also, and that's why we say that Judaism and Jews are about being a light into the nations. That begins with Abraham. Abraham is the first Jew. He's the honorary first Jew. Judaism doesn't begin really as a nation until Sinai, Exodus and Sinai. But Abraham is called the first Jew in the sense that he encapsulates and personifies the Jewish mission, which is being a light unto others. It's not just about having the light, it's being a light unto others. That's what differentiates Judaism from Noahism, which is not a thing, right? Noahism is, I know the truth. I know a guy, no. I know the truth, right? No. But that's it. By the way, I said this many times. I'm sure, I think I even said it in the context of this class. There were 9 people that were saved. Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their 3 wives, right? That's 8. Plus it says Og, the giant, was holding on to the ark. That's what it says. 9 people were saved. And we know from Abraham, when he pleaded to God to save Sodom, he says, if there are 10 righteous people, and Hashem says, yes, I will not destroy if there are 10 righteous people. We know that if you have a minion, and this minion is not gender specific. So prayer is a little bit different for technical reasons. But this minion this is very egalitarian. So right, if there's 10 people that are worth saving, you save everybody. And Noah built the ark for 120 years. And in 120 years, he couldn't make a minion. He had to get one person to come to the side of monotheism, one person to believe in Hashem, one more. He had 9. Him, his wife, his sons, their wives, and Og. It's not fitting. He couldn't recruit one guy. He couldn't educate one. You know why? You know why he couldn't? Because he didn't try. Why? Because I got my fur coat. I got my boat. Have boat, we'll float. That's it. I don't need you. I don't need you guys. I don't need you. If I'm safe.
I always thought it took him that long because he was stalling.
I thought because he was Jewish. What do Jews know about building? I go to Home Depot. No, I know. All right. Hold on. Slow down. Here's the deal. When I go to Home Depot before Pesach, it's kind of like, what's the thing that bangs the other thing? Oh, you mean a hammer? Oh, now we're talking. All right, so that's the way it works. Here's the point. Noah was all about himself. It was all about his self-preservation. And by the way, no one's faulting him. We're just drawing a contrast between him and Abraham. By the way, Abraham also wasn't the ultimate. Because when God says to Abraham, I'm so sorry, you don't have those 10 righteous people. Abraham says, all right, and he goes home. And you know what happens to Sodom? It gets destroyed. What happens yesterday in the parasha? In Kisisa, we just read it yesterday. After the golden calf, right? And God says, I'm going to destroy them. They're guilty. And you know what? They were guilty. We've been reading about the sin of the golden calf. We've been reading about it in our text.
But you're justifying it here.
1 second. I'm justifying the origins. Well, I'm not justifying it. I'm explaining how it got there. So what does Moses say? Moses says, forgive them. Forgive them. V'im ayin, and if not, mecheni no misifra shekasavta, erase me from your work, erase me from the Torah. Take me out. I mean, not like, that sounds ominous, but take me out of your book. I don't want to have it to do with anything of this Judaism if you can't open up a path for those that are guilty. Not because they're not guilty, they are guilty. Will you give a second chance to someone who is guilty?
But they killed most of the guilty.
All right, yeah, that's true also. All right, okay, fine. True. Yeah. Whatever. There were some that were killed. Yes, okay, fine. But Toba, no fact checking here. No fact checking. Next level. Moses was about going to bat, not for the innocent and for the guilty, but based on the innocent, but to go to bat for the guilty based on love and and acceptance and second chances. And that is the source of teshuvah, the idea that we can do something wrong and still have an option to come back. That's what's symbolized by those tablets. He shatters the tablets and then it gets a second set of tablets, right? And the message is, even when things seem to be broken beyond repair, can't glue those things together, there's still a second chance. How? There's a second chance.
There's supernatural glue.
There is. Even stronger than the Gorilla Glue. Remember that guy with the commercial? Talking about good commercials. The guy with the helmet. Wasn't he with a helmet on a beam on a construction site? Am I wrong here? No. The super glue. The super glue.
Oh, yes.
The super
He
glue.
glued super glue, he built the helmet to the beam, he held on to the hat and floated there, yes.
But that was a real shot.
Yes, that was.
Well, I don't know if it's real, but that was.
Well, that was the premise was that it was real. It was supposed to.
The professional sitting next to you, if that advertisement was legit.
Norm, what do you say?
You can't do false advertising.
That's right. That would be wrong.
You see, the expert is supposed to-
The Right. But they just do a wide angle shot. All right. So let's wrap this up. So here's the point. Idolatry, as Maimonides breaks it down, was the product of an evolution. And it begins with belief in God. And it's, again, trying to be nice to God. If God is so big and so pure and so perfect, certainly God put other forces in place in order to handle the day-to-day operations.
So what
God
you're
puts-
saying is to believe in an idol, you have to believe in God to begin with. As an infinite.
Good. And that's when
Started an album.
because they went to an erroneous place and they came to negative conclusions.
They pushed us to that place. It was a logical conclusion.
Yeah.
It was a logical conclusion.
I could empathize, but facts are the facts. No, I'm just, so here's the point. Yeah, I can sympathize, whatever, but like
Be manipulated by guys that want to make money off of idols.
that was ultimately where I got to. All right, at that point,
His father had a good business going until his son came and busted.
yeah, he had idols are us. It was fantastic. Now,
He was
so
the king
what's
of idols.
so what's the point? Just to bring this back, so we have clarity here. Idolatry begins with belief in God. As I said, every lie begins with the truth. Every sheker needs a foundation of emet in order to stand, because pure falsehood does not stand on its own. If someone were to say to those early generations, oh, God doesn't exist, this little stone, this carving is the source of life, they would be laughed out of the room. But they got to the same conclusion through this slow process. And what was the process? You begin with the truth. If you want to create a big lie, the big lie begins with the big truth. The biggest lie begins with the biggest truth. This big lie begins with the truth that God is amazing, God is great, God is perfect, God is infinite. But that leads to the conclusion, right, that God is so big that he can't or won't fit into this space. So what does? The sun and moon and stars and constellations. Aha. Well, then let's honor them, not serve them, not worship them. Let's honor them. Now you have this idea of let's not only honor them, but let's serve them. Because you know what? If you give a bigger tip, or if you allude to the fact that you're going to give a bigger tip, you're going to grease the wheels, you're going to get faster service, right? And if you tip big last time, you go back to the same restaurant, you know what's going to happen? You're going to get better service. And you might just get a few extra perks. And once in a while, you make a dessert on the house if you're a regular customer. So you know what? Me and the sun, we're tight. I know that the sun is not the source. I get it. God's in charge, but God's not getting involved in day-to-day heat and day-to-day life. So therefore, the sun is involved. And if I want something from the sun, I'm going to smear the sun. I'm going to get the sun greased up. I'm going to get the sun, get that moving. And then it evolves to images, to statues, to false prophets who say that no, the sun is the only thing. And eventually you get to the big lie that starts off with the big truth. But you get to the big lie, and that is God. I don't know about a God, but I know about the sun. I know about this idol. And if you want to be successful, this is what you have to serve. My friends, as was mentioned earlier, Today we have the same reality. Today's class is all about American idols. It's the same story, maybe with different words, maybe not running after statues of wood, but we still are running after statues of gold. We're still running after lots of forms and lots of images that we worship. Kids and even adults have what we call their idols, people that they look up to, and it's good to have mentors, and it's good to have heroes on some level if they're worthy of being made into a hero. But nonetheless, this idea of deifying things is still prevalent today. We worship things because we believe they have power. I taught a class recently in the JLI course, the Booksmart course we just concluded a few weeks ago. We quoted from the Talmud. The Talmud says, if somebody gets angry, they're serving idols. So what's the connection between anger and idolatry? You know what the connection is? When we get angry, what we're doing is we're attributing power to that person. You ruined my day. I'm upset. You ruined my day. That's giving power to a force other than God. That's like someone saying the sun, as if we look at these orbs, I can't believe I didn't notice these earlier, these orbs in our heaven space right here, right? As we attribute power to something else, we are touching on subtle forms of idolatry. To believe that something has power over us, whether for positive or negative. If we believe that our parnasa, that our livelihood comes through this, that, or the other, and we forget about Hashem, then that's a subtle form of idolatry. If we believe that that the negative stuff is coming from something or the other, and then that's also attributing power to something else other than God. And so strict monotheism is understanding, as we didn't get to go inside our text, our discourse text, but as we'll see next week when we actually jump inside, we will quickly notice that the antidote to this is to recognize that God is absolutely hands-on, and God is present, and God is running everything, and thus there is no space to worship anything else. And the example that will be used is like a hammer in the hands of the builder. Somebody builds something, you don't say, wow, you must have had a great hammer, right? Michelangelo, wow, I wonder what kind of paintbrush you used. That's like when you see a photographer with beautiful pictures, like, what camera do you use? The implication being, if I only had that camera, I could produce such images, right? Yeah, right. I feel like that, but I know that that's not true, because just like if I only had the camera, I would just click and boom, the art and the composition would all be in the post-production. No. So there's an art, right? There's an art to this.
Let you believe
And
that
so-
pay them.
Huh? Right.
Let you believe that, so you pay them.
That's the big live, big photography. Anyway, all right, back to the point.
But what's more valuable, that photograph or the original?
Oh, or the painting, right? That's good.
What Rabbi Newsom
That's what he spoke about.
that
Yeah.
you were-
No, he spoke about that Friday night, I think. I think it was Friday night. Oh, yesterday? I heard it somewhere. I heard it through the grapevine. I heard it. It wasn't yesterday. Huh.
No, he keeps repeating.
Apparently, there's been multiple sightings. All right.
And then Rabbi Newsom gives the same sermon every Shabbos.
All right, hold on.
Eat something, people once in a while they'll-
Guys, he's heard us speaking about him, and so we're now all in trouble. All right, so my friends,
He's
God.
I am just moderating this. Here's the point.
I read that too. You actually pay more for art than a picture of the exact same thing, because it's all about this was farce, et cetera, but human imperfection. There is beauty in imperfection. Because
Yes.
it's real.
It's real. It's genuine.
Versus,
You could have given the sermon, Yaakov.
Look at you, Yaakov. You're natural.
Could have given the sermon.
I just read.
That's I think you're taking on that.
Like someone from the people of the book, you were well read. All right, so let's close this out. So let's get the idea. So so Kabbalah teaches, Judaism teaches that the truth is it's kegarzim b'yadachotzav, like a hammer in the hands of the craftsman, like a brush in the hand of the artist. You wouldn't thank the brush. You thank the waiter, but you don't thank the brush. When you go to a restaurant, you should thank your waiter and you should tip your waiter, but you don't thank the paintbrush. There's a difference. The sun to God is like the paintbrush to the artist, not like the waiter to the chef. That's the distinction. They missed it at the core. And the core reason why they missed it is because they thought that God could not be actually painting with the brush of the sun. Because why would God paint this ugly mess? Must be that these are painting on their own, and thus we should at least honor them and then serve them and then create images after them, etc., etc., etc. The truth is contrary to that belief. And so, my friends, as we follow up last week's Torah portion, which is about the sin of the golden calf, let us recommit to the truth, which is truth, justice, and the American way, which is this idea that that only God is in control. Let's not relinquish. Let's not give power. Let's not attribute power to things that don't deserve power. Let's not drive ourselves crazy over things that don't deserve that attention from us. Let's live lives of contentedness and bitachon and emunah that are focused completely on the source that really has the control and the power. And my friends, that's what it means to live a life with having a little faith. Thank you very much for joining me today for Kabbalah Café. Same bad time, same bad channel next week. And as we continue next week, my pledge is we will crack open our text once again, and we are going to read some incredible stuff and insights into Pharaoh, ancient Egypt, and we will get to astrology as well. All right, so all of that upcoming.
First of all, you should call off. But
Pleasure.
one quick question. We limit God because we say he doesn't eat. So isn't
Right.
that a limitation?
Oh, good.
Oh, okay.
Good. Don't we limit God by saying he can't eat? That's also a limitation. In other words, if you're saying that the argument that we make in Jewish philosophy, Kabbalah, Chassidus, etc., is that to say that God is only infinite is a limitation, paradoxically, because then you're limiting him up there and not here. So, and I said that doesn't always fly, because sometimes the lack of a limitation is not a limitation.
Mhm.
You with me?
Yeah.
If we're part of God and we were eating, that's like God coming all the way down to a low level. And then-
Yeah, I know.
No. But he's asking to say that God doesn't have needs, or doesn't need to eat, or doesn't need to sleep. Is that also limiting God? You're saying, oh, if God is truly infinite, so he also has to sleep. Which it's a great question.
He's particular with what he eats. It's kosher,
He-
Yisrael, pas Yisrael.
Right. He only eats at Ali's Cookies, chef.
And we gotta figure out a way for you to eat a hot breakfast instead of a nice cold one.
I put that away from my wife.
A way for her to have a nice hot breakfast.
Yeah, she'll reheat it. She'll reheat it. There's only so much I can do. I don't even know. No, but I'm with you. Listen, Jeff, thank you for the eggs, as always.
My
Shakoach.
pleasure.
And
That's the case.
nice,
Next week, maybe we can see the professor here.
nice. Who's the professor? Oh, I got you. Maybe. All right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
But not getting angry, that makes you less than human, because it's such a human
Yeah,
emotion.
yeah.
I mean, you don't want to let it run.
Excellent.
over you, but
Right. So that's how I understand it. That's how I understand it. I understand the way you're understanding it. I think there's certain things, there's certain natural impulses and certain natural reactions that we can't, if we control that, then we wouldn't be human. Then we wouldn't be human. And I think what we're saying is not to dwell. Yeah,
Because I think it's thinking that like some of these emotions are washing over you, where like you can't stop the fact that something is going to make you angry, but then what you can stop is
Right.
stewing in that anger and almost have like
Yeah.
in third person, being like, oh, I know I'm getting angry because I feel like you're doing this thing to me, but
That
I
you're in
can't-
control, yeah.
Like there's so many other things that are driving you that you're not,
right. Yeah.
and like.
you shouldn't get angry, it's giving away the power.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And yeah, we don't want to make it too extreme where it's like impossible and it's robotic. I'll say that the example that we used to think about back in the day was like, certain natural impulses that aren't healthy. I mean, that we would not a judgment for anybody else, that we ourselves determined not to be healthy. They come up naturally. It's like back in the day when you were browsing the internet without like ad blockers or whatever, and like you would get pop-ups. And so that's not on you. The pop-up is somebody, even today, there's a pop-up. The question is, now that it's on the screen, what are you going to do? Are you going to click on it and engage in it? And like, oh, let's go down this rabbit hole. Or you, in the corner, there's a little X or whatever it is, are you gonna click the X to close it, which requires being centered and having that, the mindfulness that can override the impulse, because that pop-up is gonna be something that's gonna try to get you impulsive, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be, whatever, but it could be whatever it is, but something like an ad, something to get you excited about something. And if it's a negative thing, if it's like a set of, I don't know, dishes, it's fine.
Can I-
Look on it. But I'm saying if it's,
This is gonna sound like not connected, but it is. This is a lot of, I guess, what I heard from the philosophy.
Matt.
The philosophy
Say hi.
of Star Wars.
Okay.
The difference between the dark and the light side, where the dark side would say our emotions that are coming up, that's freedom in a sense, that allowing yourself to be
to feel.
to let's say be overwhelmed by these emotions is a freedom thing, and you're controlling the emotion, you're a slave to that, let's say your higher self. But then people in the light say the opposite, that no, that higher self is you, and allowing yourself to be consumed by the emotion, that's slavery. So there's a disagreement on what is the
That's in Star Wars?
So that's
very deep.
That's the
Wow.
That's extended universe.
Really?
Let's say so there's a lot of literature on, let's say, the like thousands of years even before the original Star Wars film. That's where that came from. There's a lot of books that are like, several thousand years even before A New Hope.
Wow. I gotta brush up on my Star Wars stuff, but that sounds fantastic. I love that. That's deep. We got to do a class on
Yeah,
that.
unfortunately, I think the movies, because maybe a wider audience, I don't think
They
go
kind of
as
dumbed it
deep.
down a little bit.
Speaking of science fiction.
Shit. Love that. I have a friend who wrote a book called Up, Up, and Oive. It's about the Jew. No, legit. He's a Chabad rabbi in Brooklyn. And he just like analyzed. This has been done many times before, to analyze like the Jewish origins of the superheroes of Spider-Man and
Well, I have a book called Superman.
also right.
Superman circumcised.
Oh, really? It's called Superman.
That is a great title.
Superman circumcised? That's
He had a master's degree from Columbia University,
okay.
writing about Superman and Jewish origins and the whole history of the comic book. And all the
Very-
themes.
it was very Jewish. Yeah. It was Kal-El, right? That was the planet that he came from, or his father. But even the planet where there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's Jewish guys who wrote this.
He came from Krypton,
Krypton.
because kryptonite makes him
Were the
powerless.
Jewish origins of Batman?
Huh?
Were the Jewish origins of Batman, or was that a Marvel thing?
No, Batman came from the Wuhan.
Well done. Batman is
The web market.
Wuhan. No, but Batman is who wrote Batman?
I mean,
Who Stanley wrote what?
Stan Lee did all this.
Spider-Man?
Yeah,
Marvel Comics.
Marvel comics.
Well, there's many people with Batman. I think one of the more famous people was Frank Grimm, but he was later, so he was not the original one who did Batman.
A lot of the
His
originals.
book on Superman goes through the whole history, Jewish history, the whole comic book.
Was Jewish.
It
was all Jewish originally. Yeah. It was all a way of gaining. What does he write this? Because I've seen this theory that to gain power in a powerless time, it was like creating these heroes,
And they could do. This.
underdogs and whatever.
They could start out small, they didn't have to be part of the corporation.
Right.
But they post
Yeah.
World War II.
I think it was post-World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes sense to like just creating superheroes and
No,
saving the
Superman
world.
was, right before the war, because World War II that made him famous, because he went overseas to fight Hitler.
Oh, the
Superman.
in the comics he went to fight Hitler. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Superman's the only one that you
I gotta pull out my original copy, my mint condition copy of Volume 1, and just dust it off. Imagine, right? Oh, you
So
go.
that'd be
Wow.
like in a glass case, in another glass case, in a vault, in a safe on the ground.
I remember I'll bring the book.
I would love to see that.
Supposed to bring the day.
Great title.
My grandkids were little, so maybe 15 years ago. So every week she would make a different part. She would make all things for the whole park. And demonstrate that.
Oh, nice.
So she has one with the ego with the golden cap. It's just great.
Like a
Well, it's about this.
Is she
Got the fire burn, got the guy standing.
was it a physical? She creates like a physical She builds a parsha. What do they call them? Diorama. Yeah, that's very cool.
The only one we never built completely was the, at Har Sinai.
Oh,
We ate it. Well, we did. It was the coolest.
is it cake?
Yeah. We'd never done a, we did not, cake, we frosted, what do you call that frosting? It's hard.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. No. It's fondant.
We'd
Yeah.
never done it.
Don't ask me
We
how I
made
know.
this chocolate chip. Put this one down. And then we had fence around it, and had the people off in there. And above, before it's up, we hang all the, I got some cotton and we hang all this yarn and stuff just hanging down like clouds, and we put lights in it that we had set up that would flash on and off.
Wow,
So then, and my grandkids were little, probably.
that's legit.
5, and they said, "Is that a cake?" I said, "No, it's not. That's a cake." I said, "No, it's not a cake. Touch it." It was hard. I said, "It was."
Yeah.
"Oh, it's not a cake."
Did you eat
So at the end, we ate it. and I
Then-
told
then
them,
they ate it.
"Now what you tell everybody, you internalized.
Oh, Sinai. Oh, absorbing the Torah at Sinai.
The little, I'll bring it.
That's very cute. You still have the originals that were made? The collection? That's so cute.
She doesn't like to show them. We need to go back and touch up.
You should make an exhibit.
Yeah, I was just thinking, why not like a museum
She
night?
wanted to- So.
That would be very
Took
cool.
it out last week. And some of the old ones where we used glue and stuff, okay, this one was fine. And I had it sitting out. And this year I might bring you, no, you can't get this in one place, steal all our stuff. I went down to get this morning, I don't know where she hid it, but it was gone.
It was not around. Okay.
But what's this about, it? We had on it, so we had this calf, it's painted in gold. So I said, we can't, it's an idol, so we cut off, we clipped off the tip of his ear.
Got it.
So we had that laying there. So now we give this to our little kids. And I'm telling them about idols, we don't worship idols. And my granddaughter said, and so we showed her, no, here's the little piece to cut off. So she's looking around, she's about 6, I guess. We have this statue my mother had of a woman, it's supposed to be roof like this, but it's a woman's head, just a marble thing, like, it's standing on over a pedestal. I said, come over here. Lucky I thought about it before.
We thought about it.
I took a screwdriver and I scratched behind the ear and made a notch in there.
Got it.
And then, see, that's not.
Yeah.
Well, so it's not, that's not the idol, then no longer I have, that was idol.
Yeah.
Idol says.
Bye, Ellen. We'll see you.
How about
Have a
you
good
tackle
one.
The